Nobody.
You folks are also looking at something called positive tipping points, which I hadn't heard about
Cool.
until I started looking at the work that you folks are doing. So tell folks about what the heck a positive tipping point is.
So, we're getting to a point where, we're seeing people actually really interested in the climate, and you see climate rallies and things happening in the world. And so there's this concept that, Tim Lenton has kind of led on this at Exeter, but this idea of positive tipping points where, you can change things in society to make people behave in a more energy conscious way, perhaps. And so a really good example of this is like electric vehicles, for example. So, there's a whole structure about infrastructure and the price of batteries and things, but you can kind of, especially in Norway, you can kind of follow this through, and you get to a point where the actual price of electric vehicles is kind of on par with like petrol vehicles, and suddenly everyone's like, well, I'll go electric then. So you can imagine that as a tipping point, because you're getting to that point. You've been pushing the prices of electric vehicles down to a certain point where someone goes, yeah, I'm going to buy one, and then everybody buys them, and you get a tipping point, but in a positive way. And so us at Exeter at the moment are trying to, so we started to call them early warning signals, but I think we're now calling them early opportunity signals. So it's the idea that you use kind of the same methods. This idea that, perhaps your state is that people aren't energy conscious, very basically, or environmentally conscious, and you can degrade that state by making certain changes to, let's make electric vehicles cheaper or whatever, and that should, eventually tip people into deciding that they want to be on the other side of the fence and buy them. And so, we've got we're looking at lots of interesting data at the moment, not just like climate data, but data from what people are talking about on Twitter and car sales. One of our PhD students in the group is interested in like the movement towards like meat-free diets and whether that can be a positive tipping point. So it's all things like that. And so we're looking for the same kind of signals. So from my point of view, I have this crazy idea that socially you should be able to see the same signals, because like a perturbation in a system like that might be that, like a new electric vehicles come out or something, and so lots of people talk about that, and then the attention from that dies away, and you get back to a baseline attention, and then in a couple of months' time, if another electric vehicle comes out and people are really interested in that one, then the mentions of the topics of that or how people are talking, that'll take longer to return back. And it's exactly the same way as like the drought in the Amazon with the trees recovering. So it's a concept that definitely needs a lot more theory behind it. But naively, I can imagine that the climate itself, and whether people are interested in positive action, they should talk about climate things that have happened for longer online if they're interested about them, and that topic of conversation will last longer and take longer to die off. So it's that concept of trying to detect that that's happening, and then thinking like, well, what can we do about this? If people are thinking about this, then perhaps this should happen, just to tip them to be more conscious and stuff. So
I would imagine that there's a bit of an exploratory exercise going on as far as trying to figure out what those systems are. Like you're looking at the electric vehicle stream, right? But is that the right one to focus on as far as the thing that would cause the tipping point? And obviously there's going to be multiple factors. Growth in renewable energy might be another stream that you're looking at, but compared to climate systems, which are probably a little bit more defined, I imagine these kind of factors, some of these streams might die off and they might not even make a difference at all, right? Some of them might emerge, or so.
Yeah, and it's a concept that's like been talked about for a while, but not from a positive tipping point of view. But it, like there's been research into, the uptake of vehicles to start with, and it's like, do they fill niches that people need? And so, like, there was a certain uptake of cars for people, I don't know, who like needed them for business or something, but then certain cars came out that let people like travel for pleasure and things, and it's filling those niches and things. And so we're on a project now for the next year or so that's trying to work out how to quantify these things and measure them and see if you can see these interactions and put things in place to try and help the climate at the same time. So